Hey there, Mountain Movers. Super excited about this week's episode. I'm joined by Kehkashan Dadwani, who is just a fantastic human being, a positive force in the security industry, dropping so much knowledge about how to effectively transition through different aspects of your career, how to deal with adversity, how to face adversity with confidence and kindness and a programmatic attention to detail that's unlike anything that I've seen. You're going to want to get that notepad out, take some detailed actions out of this masterclass of a conversation that I have with Kehkashan. You can follow her on LinkedIn. I'll put her link in the show notes. She's someone that you want to get connected to, that you want to learn about, that you want to learn from. I also want to remind you of the opportunities that we have forthcoming with Apex Performance. We have new training modules coming out. We have monthly Ask Me Anythings and live community activities in our community inside our portal that is at no cost to you. So jump in there, go to apexperformance.one. Jump in there, become a part of our community. We're in this fight together. Now let's jump into this episode and learn from Kehkashan. Welcome back, or welcome to the Next Level podcast. I'm your host, John Harris. And as always, we are brought to you by Apex Performance, the only leadership and performance training academy for security professionals by security professionals. And you know how we do here. Each week, we bring you a thought leader, an industry maverick, somebody just awesome from my friends list that I think has something neat and interesting to share with the audience. And today is no different. I am super excited after many, many months of trying to get our calendars to align. I have the lovely and brilliant Kehkashan Dadwani joining us on the podcast. So Kehkashan, thank you for taking the time and carving out a little bit of your schedule for us, and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, John. I just, really appreciate you being super flexible. It's been quite the journey of getting us here today. So I'm just excited to have this time with you and talk about some really cool stuff.
Well, there's nothing like packing up your entire life and moving halfway across the country and getting all settled in, and then traveling, 90% of that time for work to disrupt our ability to get together. And so, and I moved out more than once on you too. So this wasn't a you problem. This was an us problem. So, but we made it work, and we're finally here. So thank you. So Kehkashan, I don't want to take for granted that everyone who listens to the show knows about you, knows about the kindness games, knows about the GSD crew, like all the reasons that you and I know each other, why they would know too. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of where you come from and the journey that brought you into the security industry?
Wow. The journey to the kindness games and GSD is a long one. So I will I'll try to hit the highlights, but it's really interesting because when I came into the security industry, I did not feel like a security professional because I come from a communications background. That is what I did for about 10-ish years of my adult life as a copy editor, project manager, graphic designer. And then one day I decided I wanted to, give back to my country. I am a first generation immigrant. I moved here from Pakistan when I was like 11 with my family. And it gave me this sense of like purpose. And so I went to the Bush School to get a master's in international affairs and really got excited about security. I had a concentration in military affairs and diplomacy. I'd never done something like that before. I got a bachelor's in political science, but that was the extent of it. So 2 years of like aggressive learning. I make my way into the security industry by way of Facebook. And it's such an interesting journey because doing security in a regular industry is already, an interesting experience, but then you go into tech, it's a whole different environment and individuals that you're working with. And I was super used to working with, civilians, individuals who have never worked in the government, who have never been in law enforcement. My only experience was that in grad school. And I really got to meet a lot of people who served our country, people who've worked in the government. And I spent just shy of 8 years at Facebook Meta. And I think a lot of the folks know in May I was laid off, which, there were quite a few of us that were laid off. I think I read a number like there were 110,000 people that were laid off across different industries over like the span of 6 months. And that's a lot of people. Now, even taking a step back, I would say the most monumental moment in my security career was 2020. The pandemic was like our Super Bowl, right? Like everybody was just trying to make sure that our plans worked, that we were well prepared. We were doing something that had never been done before. And there was a lot going on in the world where I had to look internally, be like, is this okay? Am I okay? And I leaned quite heavily on my community, which is where the kindness games came out of. Tim Wenzel is one of my greatest mentors. Like I've known him for quite some time now. I ambushed him in a coffee shop. He might always tell the story of he was like, let me get my coffee, please. Struck up a conversation with him and just was like, hey, can you help me understand some of how to build a security program? And he just took me under his wing and gave me so much. And so during the pandemic, very much as I used to, I just sort of unloaded on him and I was like, there's all this stuff happening. How do, I move past? And we just had this amazing conversation. Next day, I get a kindness game shout out. I think I was Tim Wenzel's like first shout out, which, wow, it is now history. So that's really how the kindness games came to be. I joined that awesome journey and just went through the, entire thing. It took me, instead of 30 days, took me like 3 months to get through 30 posts. I feel like Tim and Lee are just these like super charismatic people and they're like so vibrant, and to be able to like match that energy, I think I had to really do some soul searching and remember like this is me. I need to do what is me and follow that process. So that's sort of like how the kindness games came to be. So back to when I got laid off in May. My God. I actually considered leaving the security industry. Glad I didn't, because now I'm in a fantastic role. I now get to be a technical program manager within a data security organization, and I can now say I'm in converged security. Like
Mm.
I've been able to do both physical security and cyber security, and I feel like that is not something a lot of folks in the industry are doing. And I feel like we should definitely talk a bit about that. And we can even talk about, being a woman or a person in color in the security industry. But that's sort of been my experience within the security space, as well as how I got to connect with the kindness games folks. Sometimes I like pinch myself. I'm like, what is my life? How did I get here? I was this little immigrant girl in 99, small town in Texas, going like, what's life going to be like? And here we are today. So I can keep
Well,
rambling on,
yeah,
but
well, there's a lot in there that I want to dig into and unpack them, and maybe start with like, not everybody. So, during the back end of the pandemic, we had a version of the kindness games, or we had a GSD kindness games book that we had started writing.
yeah,
I still have the chapters of that in my Google Drive. And they were our own personal stories. And I remember reading yours and being extremely moved by the story that you told. It was more focused on that, 11 years to maybe 22, and just, that personal story of what compelled you and brought you into the industry. Um, how do you think that, because you mentioned a little something about your background I thought was really interesting. You marketing, copywriting, communication, those are nowadays, I think security professionals would kill to have that skill set and knowledge, because effective writing and communication and like doing kind of PR within both internally and externally are something we do very poorly. And yet you have it as almost a core competency. So how do you think that, well, I'm going to make an assumption that that did serve you well in your career, especially in those early years as you're navigating, maybe finding how you add value. And this is me, you tell me if I'm off base. You move into a company like Meta that's so massive, and you're kind of an embedded like program manager, like liaison almost, right, within like trying to advocate for security with inside these other organizations. Communication, writing, PR, like those were necessary skills in that role, as I'm assuming. So talk a little bit about how that maybe unintentional background really equipped you for success both early on, and I imagine, to this day that having those skills are extremely valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. I think having that marketing background is so critical in any role, especially as a program manager, a leader, someone who is trying to build something and get buy-in, right? Because a lot of what we do is you can come up with an idea, right? But without a plan and without an ability to execute on it and getting people to say, wow, we need this, you can't go about it alone. Like we've learned this over and over again. You cannot succeed alone. You only succeed when you have a group of individuals who is also very much in line with your thought process. So my background in marketing allowed me to build deck after deck with just strategy. It was like when somebody was like, hey, I hear you're building XYZ program. Can I learn more? Boom. I can get on a 30-minute call with them, take them through my strategy, and then leave them with some sort of deliverable. So they have something tangible that they can take away with them. Yeah, I mean, obviously it's virtual, but like it's something that they can look through and say, oh, this is something I can like dig deep in, I can comment on, I can ask questions, versus you just sort of, doing a brain dump and then they're like, I think I got part of it, maybe 15%. And then, they go off to the next meeting and then they forget about it. And so I think that ability to tell stories through some sort of an artifact, that in itself is critical. I think customer service. This is something that a lot of people don't talk about, but we are in a customer service industry. We are a cost center. I think in the past, security professionals used a fear factor to be able to push forward. And now we're very clearly realizing that if you want to engage with leaders, they want to understand value, right? Like, what is the value of your program? What is the impact? And how is it going to make my life easier? And the best way that you can do that is through that layer of customer service. You come in as a, you are my client, I am going to serve you. And then the final thing I think is just generally people skills. Like, you need to be able to have very clear, concise conversations with your colleagues around what it is that you're trying to achieve and how fast are you trying to achieve and what sort of resources that you'll require. So I think that communications background that I attained within my first 10 years of my career absolutely helped me. And I would say my ability to project manage. Like, those were the two things that I leaned back on constantly. You can learn security. Like, it's not rocket science. But being able to gain those like soft skills, that I think that's what people call them. They call them like soft skills. I would actually call them hard skills, because they are much more harder to attain because it requires a lot of practice. And the best way to practice it is to, get on a call with a colleague, practice it in a low pressure environment, and then see how it works. That's what Tim and I did. He taught me how to build a program. I would present to him. And then when I felt confident enough, I would go to my leaders and I would go to my stakeholders and I would present those topics and would be told, wow, this was a fantastically delivered presentation. I am so excited. Can you tell me more? Let's start working on, because they knew that I was well prepared. So I'd say that is something I took away.
Mountain Movers, John checking in with you. And I want to remind you, if you don't know, Apex Performance has coaching and training and online courses available for you, made by security professionals for security professionals to help you take your leadership to the next level. So if you like the content we put in our podcast, if you're interested in learning more about what we do, click the link in the show notes or go to apexperformance.one. That's ONE, because we're number one. learn more about what we do. Love to work with you. Now back to the show. It's amazing insight. I think there's a few things you said there that I want to pull out. One, I'm going to offend a lot of people when I say this, that it's easy to learn security. You know, now you have to do it more, like it's not this like secret, you know, it's not like quantum mathematics. The
Not
kid,
rocket science.
it's not rocket science, right? I mean, the fundamental capabilities of it, now you need time and reps, and you need, but I can take somebody and teach them the fundamental capabilities of doing a security risk assessment, and it's pretty straightforward. um but the ability to get up and give a captivating presentation or do a keynote speaking event, that's hard. Now those are considered, like you said, soft skills. That requires more time and rep and capability and intentional practice, like what you did. So what I'm hearing is that, you know, instead of just going and saying like, all right, I got a great idea, I'm going to go cold pitch it to my leadership, or walk, kind of rip it and walk in here. I'm going to spend intentional time with a mentor working on this, putting, it's like when if I'm going to get in shape, there's not a magic pill. Like, I have to go do the reps. If I want to get stronger, I have to go get time under the bar, is how I say it. So it's the same thing, whether it's mental or physical. You need reps, you need time under the bar. And I think that's the hard reality for just society today, is like it takes time to
Yeah.
get better at stuff, and you have to go practice and you have to put the work in. Chat GBT can give you great content, but if you can't deliver it, it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
And so talk a little bit more about just like was that intuitive to you to put in that unrequired effort and build that extra activity? Or like, how did that become a way of approaching for you to be like, this is how I get better at something?
Yeah, I would say it was definitely not natural. People I think now who meet me are like, oh, she's a type A. She's like super prepared. She's a planner, because like that's just who I am today. But if someone knew me, like say in college or after, man, like there were so many days like things were just hodgepodge together, because you're a young professional, you're sort of figuring it out. I think there are some people who are just naturally really good at that. They're natural planners, they are naturally just capable of putting all that effort in. This took me a lot of trial and error, and a lot of mentorship. When I was younger, I had a really hard time trusting and believing in myself. And that is a journey we as individuals and like have to embark on. I think women in general tend to have that a lot more. We tend to have like that self-doubt and that imposter in our minds going like, oh, I'm not capable of this. Like that's like somebody else. And I had quite a few people who took a chance on me and saw that I had like the raw energy, but I didn't have a direction. And they helped me identify where I may be able to sort of focus that energy to be able to get to where I am today. So I'd say Meta, like Facebook, and I was there in like 2016. So, this was almost 10 years ago at this point. 8 years. When I came into that workforce, I feel like I was very uncut. Like I had a lot of great experience. I'd been in the communications industry. And those of us who have started the communications industry, we understand it is a complete like it's a hot mess in the beginning, and then you sort of like with anything else you come up. Um, I had some individuals who took me under their wing and helped me really understand how to create a plan and how to move that forward. Some people had more time than others, but it required a lot of effort on my part. When people are generous enough to give you their time, there's an expectation that you are going to put in 2 times as much effort so that you are well prepared for that 30-minute slot that they have in their schedules. Because as people get further success in their careers, there are a lot more people who want their time. So we as individuals, whenever we're younger, like now when I try to reach out to like somebody who's, 10, 15, 20 years past my career space, like I'm very intentional with like how I'm going to spend that time, what questions I'm asking. Like we're coming in very intentionally. I'd say my very first couple of sessions with fellow mentors that I did not consider mentors at the time because I was like, oh, I don't need a mentor. They were very clunky. Like the conversations were clunky. I was super nervous. They had expectations that I was not able to meet, and it was, you come away and you do an assessment of, well, how did that conversation go? And I would say like my first two, I probably came away going like, I don't think that went really well. And I think that's on me. And I had to do a little bit of internal understanding of like why that happened. And then the next couple were, okay, I'm a bit more prepared. I have a lot more questions. I've done some work. I've like literally written down plans. I've got these artifacts that nobody will ever see but my eyes, but they allowed me to think and consider. And today I can sit here and say, I have a career plan. I have my own personal marketing plan. I have an understanding of what steps I need to take in the next 6, 12, 24 months to be able to achieve my goals. Because I had people who gave me like the framework, but I used it in a way that made sense to me. So I know we sort of went through a lot of different directions here, but like again, I think to answer your question, no, it did not come easily, but through practice, motivation, and constant engagement with my community and my mentors, yeah, I feel well prepared today.
And I think that's the takeaway here is that, some people go like, oh, I'm just not a planner, or like I'm just disorganized. At some point, that's a choice that you accept it or that you decide to change it, and that you can implement. I mean, YouTube is a free university that if you want to go figure out like what's a best way for me to structure my day, or like, but there's the term like hacks gets thrown around a lot. I don't really like it, to the extent that like I think there's like maybe shortcuts, even that terminology, but I bet you could distill down. You could say, hey, here's a framework and a process. You just described to me the fact that you probably have pretty good idea what you're doing for the next 7 days, 30 days, 6 months, 12 months, and then maybe a 3 year roadmap for your career, and your family, and your like your life, right? You have a life plan that's organized to some general extent.
Yeah.
That
And it
doesn't
doesn't
happen by
have to be
accident.
like, yeah, and I think when people are like, oh my God, your like life is so planned, it's like, no, 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 no. My life is planned like very strictly for like 1 to 2 weeks, and then it sort of becomes like these big milestones, right? And then the further down you get, there's sort of like these pie in the sky, like I want to get my MBA, right?
Right.
But like to be able to get there, I need to break it down into little steps so you can work backwards from it, or you can say, I want to buy a house. Well, what are the steps that are required for you to buy a house? And then you can like place them. And then you say, here is my milestone that I need to achieve. And for any reason, your mind changes, your plan can also change. Like that's the thing about plan. I don't know why people think plans are like, this is my plan and I have to follow it as is. No, it's like plans are meant to change. They're just meant to be like a guidepost. Use it as a way to just follow along, and it helps keep you anchored, especially like someone like me, like I need to see something in writing to say, oh, I'm gonna like work on this. Otherwise it's out of sight, out of mind, and I'm never working on it again.
Well, and that's the key, just writing down, like these are, I think like a Gallup poll, or like, just like general numbers that get thrown around, but that only something like 30% of professionals write down any sort of stated career goal.
Hmm.
So think about, like, already, if you just write down like, this is what I want in the next 12 months, you've already put yourself in the top quartile of professionals that have a stated direction. And then doing what you just said, Kehkashan, saying, okay, if I want that, like, what are the 10 things I need to do to get there? 5 things. We'll use NBA for an example. Like, I had that same goal. Like, I had it for I mean, I graduated college in 2007. I wrote down, graduate school, and I didn't quite know MBA, but I had a mentor. Shout out to Brandon Gregg, who I worked at Seagate with. Fantastic security mentor early on in my career. Also, like mentor by accident. Like I didn't know he was a mentor, but he was giving me such great sage advice. I wanted to go and get my like security management grad degree because he had gotten his. And so I'm like that, like I look up to you, you did that, I want to do that too. He goes, no, 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 get an MBA. He
Yeah,
goes, what happens if you hate
that's one.
security in 10 years? You can always use an MBA. I'm like, all right, fine. So I like wrote that down. I wouldn't get my MBA till 2020, but I wrote it down probably starting like 2017, 2016, 2017, somewhere around that time. I'm going to do this.
That's about how long
Uh,
it takes. Like
yeah.
it
Well,
takes
but
about 2 years for you to plan it.
here was the thing. As soon as I wrote it, but I never, that was when I first wrote down the goal, get my MBA, right? So I spent from 2017 to 2000 or 2007 to 2016, we'll call it. So 9 years with it just in my head, kicking around vaguely. I want to go to grad school. Then I write down, I want my MBA. And then the first step I had to take was find a school, find a program, right? So I find a school, find a program. I found the one. I ended up going to Northeastern in Boston, found the one I wanted that had the specifics that I wanted, apply, right? So there was like
Yep.
three, find the school, apply to it, right? You can't get it without doing that first, right? So those
Yep.
are just simple things we have to do. And so by 2017 to 2020, you can't see it because it's buzzed out, but this white blob right here is my MBA degree on behind me. So 3 years after I actually wrote it down, then I executed it, right? So that's the power of just writing down and
Yep.
committing, is that like I wrote down once upon a time that I wanted a podcast. I wrote down that I wanted to start my own company. All those things have come true once I wrote them down and started, reverse engineering the simple actions I needed to take, like forming an LLC and creating a website. That's a couple $100 and a few hours of work, right? Like you overestimate. Here's the two truths, I think. You overestimate the amount of effort it takes to get started. You underestimate the amount of hours it takes you to get good at it.
Yeah.
And so we spend too much time not starting. Just imagine I spent 10 years waiting to get my MBA. It took 3 years to get it, right? I could have had three of them if I would have just started. But that's neither here nor there, right? The best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The next best time is today. So
Yep.
don't let the kind of fear of taking action hold you back from taking action, but also don't think that just by getting starting you're going to get done. Like you mentioned before, you got to put the work in, you got to get prepared, you got to show up and actually execute on the things that you're committing to.
Yeah.
um
And I think one thing I'll also add, I think this is something that has like gotten really a little wild in our society is like people sort of compete with others. Like they like
mm,
look at somebody and they'll go, well, I want that. So I'm gonna do all the things that this person's doing. And your circumstances might be completely different and they might have different set of resources and they might have a different set of privilege than you and you might be in a different like area in your environment. The only individual you should be competing yourself with is yourself. Like you are the only person that you should be competing with where you say, where am I today? Where do I want to be tomorrow? Take a look back in the rearview mirror and you're going to realize so much that you have accomplished. Like we need to give ourselves that grace and we need to give ourselves like that, confidence and that like, wow, I've done all these things. And every so often, like towards the end of the year, I do my own self-review. Like this is not a company sponsored thing, but a Kehkashan sponsored thing. And I take a look back at everything that I've accomplished in 12 months time. And I go, wow, like, holy crap, we did so much. Yeah, some of those things may not have been like what I'd intended to do. Last year I went to 64 shows. Super proud of that. I went to concerts like it was my job. But I think you have to, right? Like you have to take a look back and celebrate all the different things that you've done because that's life. One day you
uh,
won't be here anymore. What are you proud of?
I couldn't agree more. And I just posted on LinkedIn today. I do this every month with performance coaching clients that I work with. I encourage them to do it weekly, but for sure once a month. Kind of two frames of reference. The first two questions you ask yourself: one, what are the habits and activities for the last 30 days that are causing me to win? And then two, what are the habits or activities that are holding me back, or opportunities to do things that I'm not doing? What should I add in? And if you look at that every 30 days, what am I doing that's helping me win? Do more of that. What's
Yeah.
holding me back? Do less of that. Or what's the opportunity I need to start doing? And then take that and you have a 30-day action plan, go. Right. And
Yeah.
just measuring each day, like, what am I doing? And these are the things I said were helping me win. How am I doing more of that? And then secondly, it's there's this fantastic book called The Gap and the Gain. And we often measure ourselves to the gap, meaning what don't I have? Just like you said. So if I look over and I'm like, you know, Tim and Lee, they wrote a book. I want to write a book. I don't have a book. The gap, right? It's like I'll never measure up because I have this idea of the thing I want to become and I'm not there yet. So I'm measuring back from where I want to be and I'm only seeing, and for high performers and entrepreneurs, this is a common problem where you're measuring yourself to someone else who they're in their 10th mile of the race and you're in two. And so you're looking ahead and saying, why am I not at 10 yet? And you're measuring that gap versus
Yeah.
the gain. Where were you yesterday? Where were
Yeah.
you 2 years ago? And look how far I've come, because we all want to have big ambitious goals. And so if you're saying like, man, I didn't quite get to where I wanted to go, but look how far I came, that's an amazing measure to look at. So it's a fantastic book, and Benjamin Hardy is the author. I'll post the Amazon link in my show notes because I have it on Audible and the physical copy. It's a fantastic book.
I'm
I've
gonna have
read
to
it
read it.
multiple times, but it's a simple framework of like how far have you come versus how far you have to go, measuring how far you've come, and then resetting and obviously continuing to charge forward.
Yeah.
So couldn't agree more with you on there. I want to take a quick shift here, real quick. I want to talk a little bit more about the process of that job transition that you went through. I've made very publicly around when I got laid off at Linnell and the impact it had on me in a positive way. Now, it wasn't without its struggles. You know, father of four, husband, was the single breadwinner at the time, threw my entire life into upheaval. But I would never have gotten to where I am now if not just if that didn't happen and kind of force me to move off of comfort and do something different. But the way I handled it, I think is probably what I'm most proud of. You had a similar, what I would say, gracious transition, but I'm sure it wasn't without its challenges. So you leave Meta, not of your own doing. You talked about, and I went through the same kind of internal exercise of like, if I ever wanted to get out of the security industry, here's the time, because I got a clean break, right? So I was
Yep.
thinking the same thing. I was all types of, nothing was off the table for me. So talk a little bit, to the extent that you're comfortable with, talk a little bit about that process of just like, you know, getting the news, maybe struggling with like the feelings of that happening to you, and then finding the new thing and the right thing, and also the time, because I know you took some intentional time for yourself during that period as well. You've alluded to it, of like, going to shows like it was your job and actually making that choice. So a little bit about that, that period of time where you really got to maybe do some self-discovery, self-reflection before you got on to the next thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it was, man, every time I think about that time, I sort of have to like take a step back and just remember I'm in like a much better place now. I found out in May that I was laid off, but I had been preparing for it because we had been told by our organization that there was going to be a round of layoffs. And I am a pretty like strategic person. Like I look at the data points and I consider like what, based on the information that is available, where might this go? I was leading an internal marketing slash data analytics department within a security organization, right? Like that is an extracurricular department in any sense of the way. And so I had pretty much prepared myself. I had done the best I could to prepare my team, but when it happens, like you still have that shock, right? Like you're like, okay, like it happened. So one of the very first things I did was like the day that we were supposed to get the news, I had an activity plan for myself. I was like, no matter which way it goes, I'm going to make sure I get out of this house and go do something, because I know myself. I know I will sort of like spiral out of control. And so that was like the very first thing that I did. I spent some time with my friends. I went to a Red Hot Chili Pepper show. It was fantastic. I loved it. As you can tell, I really enjoy live music. So when that happened, I had already made up my mind. I was like, if I get laid off, I am not even gonna touch a laptop for like 2 weeks. I made my post on LinkedIn. I, even gave people my plan. I was like, hey, this is what's happened. I'm taking the next couple of weeks off. This is sort of my plan afterwards. I'm gonna like focus on self, focus on like my career, sort of do an intentional like, how do I do a reset? I'd originally intended 2 weeks. I literally took 3 months off. I just could not get myself to like actively start applying for a job because I was so burnt out. I was burnt out. My mental health was in shambles. My husband was just the most supportive human being that I could have met. I had incredible mentors and partners. Joe Heckman, who is my mentor and also has become a friend, was like always there, and Greg Gregory, like those two people probably like just kept me constantly going. And then I got a career coach. I took 3 months off, and I read books, I went to shows, I did whatever my heart desired, and then I sat down, I signed up for the career coach that Meta had provided. I wrote down my plan. During those 3 months, I ruminated on, what do I want to do with my life when I grow up? I wrote my plan, I worked with that coach, and even like she was like, wow, you like when you say you're gonna do something, you've actually like shown up with a plan in place. And I think that's like, you have to have accountability. Like that is so, so important. So when I started working with a career coach, I started having 30-minute discovery calls with as many people that would give me a time. It'd be like, hey, I'm super interested in doing X. And at that time, I had pretty much decided I wanted to be a program manager. I was like, program manager, like program managing is like what I do best. I am really good at organizing. I am really good at taking like pieces of a strategy and creating a big picture. I understand how to take a big picture to like miniature steps, and I understand how to engage. Program manager seems like the best calling for me. So I wrote that down. I was like, I think I want to stick in security, but I really want to go down the cybersecurity path. So I met with as many people as possible. I just like turned over any rock that I could. And then eventually, a former colleague of mine reached out to me randomly and was like, hey, this role popped up. I know the conversation that we'd had was like you were looking for like a technical program manager role. Would this be something that you're interested in? I was like, yes, absolutely. And at that point, I think I applied to an upward of like 585 roles. Like I was like tracking everything. Um, if I applied cold, like put in a cold application, I got 0 callbacks. Like I got no response, no nothing. Of the referrals I sent in through individuals that I knew, I got 25% was I got a call back. And of the 25%, I would say, of that 25%, 80% of the time I got a first interview. Like I got a first interview, and then like of that I ended up in like 5 or 6 final calls, and then I had 3 offers and I picked one of them. And again, keeping track of that data was also like really impactful for me because I could clearly tell cold applications were not working. So I just tossed that aside. I was like, data has spoken. I'm gonna just focus on my network and my community. And I probably looked for about 10 weeks. Like my search time total was 10 weeks. And the day that 10 weeks, I got the offers, I signed my letter. Now I'm with the US Data Security Department of TikTok. And from the day my severance ran out was the first day I got my first paycheck. And I felt so lucky because I know that I have a very extroverted nature that works for me. And not a lot of people have the same type of skill set. Not a lot of people have the same type of community that I have built out. And I feel incredibly fortunate that I was able to do this. That is not to say that somebody else would have the same experience. That is not to say that the individual has any less skill or any less ability to do the job. It's a really hard market out there, and you just have to hustle. Like, it's just that hard. Like, the 10 weeks that I was like seriously looking for a job, like I was doing that for like 10 to 12-hour days. Like, I had calls, I applied for jobs, I prepped for my meetings. That is all I was doing for 10 weeks. And then as soon as I signed my offer letter, I was like, hallelujah, I'm gonna go to another show. That was my prize.
Well, I mean, just like the one, I don't want to understate the amount of effort that you put in for the 5 to 8 years predicating that layoff that allowed you to then activate that network. And I think of just the first time Tim introduced you into our circle. Um, we have like a WhatsApp group chat with like original GSDers, and it's kind of like people have come and gone and introduced new people, but it was still like less than a dozen people at the time, and um, I could go back and look at the actual text, but it was someone like something along the lines of, "Hey, this is Kehkashan. She's awesome. You guys should get to know her." Right. And so like, and then it was born. Right. And so in that group is Brittany Galley,
Yeah.
Mary Gamble, Lisa Oliveri, Lee Outen, Jason Sikora, um, Lee or Tim, obviously, a handful of others, but it was like, and then it all kind of blossomed from there. And I remember being on, I mean, this was, we didn't even know what we were going to try to do with anything yet, but sitting on a GSD strategy call, you're in like Mary's house, I think, in like her living room with her and Brittany. We're doing a Zoom call. We're like, and like the whole world changed after that. And we all ended up kind of going off in different places, but it was this like community of, we knew the people who were a part of this were going to, and then part of that spurred off to be the kindness games, and it all, that whole group is still a nexus of action, activity, and amplification. And you know you leaned into that and then created valuable connections, and then more connections, and then sheer volume of knowing that you did 483 or 583, whatever the number was, right, and tracking that, and like, and showing the trend, because a lot of people will just like, LinkedIn makes it so easy to just like power apply. You could just do like easy apply,
Many
easy
of
apply,
those.
easy apply, easy apply, and not even track it. But for you to know that like this one has referrals, this one brought me here, like to know, all right, now I need to squeeze this down, and only just the intentionality and focus on that. Because when I got laid off, I remember thinking the same thing. Like, all right, now I'm gonna take 1 week to just like decompress, and then I'm gonna lean into this, and I actually did some consulting on the side just to stay active, and like something to do, and then because I felt like I'd go crazy if I didn't like find something to do. So did consulting on the side to just keep myself active, and then 4 to 6 hours a week I was applying or connecting and having conversations and being a part of that.
Yeah.
So you have to be intentional about it and prepare for it and be ready. And so from even from the last time I like cold applied for a job was 2011. That's the last time that I just like applied, that I got, right. So like I've like applied for positions obviously that I didn't get, um but everything since then has either been by relationship, promotion,
Yeah.
or relationship based, connection based. And I don't see that changing, because also like to be able to test the waters a bit and talk to somebody and be like, what's it like over there, or am I going to like this, or what's the culture like, or like, you've been there for, like, you know my wife just went through this. I think I talked about this in the episode I did with Brittany. She re-entered the workforce after a long time being away. Kind of took the first opportunity that came her way. Not a cultural fit. Was horrible. Didn't know
Oh,
anybody there. Wasn't a cultural fit. After 2 months, she's like, miserable. She's depressed. She's like, this place sucks. I'm like, fucking pull the ripcord. Who cares? Like,
yeah.
she wasn't quite ready to. I mean, she was this. She's like, I'll start applying for some other places, and she found a place where she knew some people who worked there, knew about the culture. Oddly enough, the building is literally next door. So she's like, well, I know my commute will be the same. Got the offer, got the job, put in her notice 2 weeks ago. Today was her first day at the new spot. And, one, again, it is a tough market, but if you're intentional, if you're focused, if you're patient, and obviously it's easier to be patient when you're gainfully employed.
Yep.
It might be a little bit easier to be patient when you have a severance that you're working through. But to your point, and I had the same thing when, I was like staring down a deadline of when that severance would run out.
Yeah.
And for me, it was like, 4 kids, house, mortgage, the whole bit. Like there, that was real. That was going to be impactful if I didn't get my shit together. And so, you know, but I also, and I'd like you to talk a little bit about this. I had high confidence in myself. I knew who I was. I knew the value that I had, um, and that I was worth, the effort that I was putting in. As you put in that many applications, I'm sure at some point you're just like, what is like, is this ever going to end? But so how did you
Yeah.
keep yourself going, and keep hitting those each time and making sure you weren't getting down to yourself and calling it quits?
Yeah. And before I go there, I do want to say someone recently told me, you can love your job, but your job will never love you
Mm,
back to what your like wife just went through. And I was like, that is peak because like you have to look after yourself. But I think that's in the same vein to like how I felt when I was applying to all these jobs. Because my confidence was so like intertwined with my job because as professionals that's like 80% of our lives, that the 3 months that I did not like look for a job, I was doing like self work, right? Like I was like literally untwining myself to say I am worth more than my profession. I am not living so that I can work. I am working so that I can live. I identified what my hobbies were. Like, what is my core purpose? Who am I? Like, what kind of person am I? What are the attributes? Like, say, when you hopefully I have a very long life and my funeral comes, like, what are the things that people will say about me that are like defining parts of me? I don't want them to say, okay, Kehkashan was a great program manager. Kehkashan was great at security. No, I want them to say, Kehkashan was kind. She was curious, intelligent, just loved to collect hobbies like a gremlin, loved going to shows, like whatever it might be, right? And so that was one of the first things that I think laid down a fantastic foundation for me as I went through the application process because every time I got a rejection notice, like your confidence goes down a level. It just happens, right? Like we as humans, we want to be accepted. We want to be told that, you are worth it by somebody else. There's a self-validation and then there's the validation from your community or like even strangers, and you put so much like emphasis on that a rejection can like totally just like break you down. And I remember there was a week where I got so many, not only so many rejection letters, but I'd interviewed for a role that I really wanted. I was in the final stages. I knew somebody on the inside and they were like, hey, Sean, like we hear like it's between you and another person, like you've absolutely crushed it. And I was like, oh, this is gonna be great. And then I got back, well, you didn't have this one experience that this other individual had. So unfortunately we went with the other person. And man, like my like mindset was in shambles. I was in shambles and I did what I always do. Like I'm a people person. I need to be like out and about. So I like grabbed my husband, I grabbed a couple of friends. I was like, hey, let's go out, let's have a really good time. And just like, I'm not going to let this impact me. And so every time I had an interview, I gave myself a pep talk. Like, you got this. Even if you don't get the job, remember that you are also interviewing them. This is not a one-way street. This is a two-way street. And sometimes it just may not work out. It's like dating, right? Like you don't have to marry every single person you date. You just have to have the one person that you meet that you're like, oh, this is the person. And so I had to constantly like it was like a constant like self-drive. But I will say my community, man, like I can't talk enough about them. Like Tim gave me so many pep talks. Like Lee gave me a bunch of pep talks. Like every time I met up with them, they would have like a big smile on their face and ask me how things were going. They weren't like, "How's the job hunt?" They would ask like, "How are you doing? How are things going?" And then if I wanted to share how my job search was going, I could do that, but it wasn't everything that I was. So I think like sort of disconnecting yourself from your job is incredibly important. I can't
I mean
stress
that
that.
there's two things. Well, there's a lot. We could talk for another whole hour of everything that you just laid out and the intentionality that you took into that process. But a few things I want to go back to. One is that when you took your time away, I mean, you again, I talked to the power of that group of professionals that we had all become and friends more than professionals. And you met, when we all heard, that a lot of people in that group were getting impacted by layoffs, and you you messaged in and said, "Hey guys, like, when we saw your update, we all messaged you, and you're like, I'm going to step away." And so not just did you like close your laptop, but you disconnected from some of it, of just like, I need time and space.
Yeah.
So I just want to acknowledge and recognize you, of like you, it wasn't just surface level. It was like, I need to do some, like, this is an opportunity to do some deep self-reflection. And then, man, what people I don't think realize enough is how intertwined our identities become with our professional work, and that how detrimental that is to long-term stability and health. Because it's not just at the time, because again, like, um I think because got laid off when I did in my career, um unless I am a fully an entrepreneur, I don't feel fully comfortable. What I mean by that is that as long as someone else is employing me, I don't control my destiny. Like, I control my effort, my output, my energy, but if we have a bad quarter, our funding runs out, like, it's over. And
Right.
so it's business. It's not personal, it just is,
Business,
right?
yeah.
So like
100%.
so like I don't take that personally, because I've had the ability to put distance between my self-worth and my professional life.
Yep.
And if I fuck up on a project, like, mistakes happen. It doesn't mean I'm a bad person. It doesn't mean I'm deficient as a human. It means I made a mistake. Now, if I do it twice or three times, or I don't learn from my mistakes, then maybe that is showing a personality flaw or a defect that I need to correct. But my work output and my human worth are not connected. And that's what I would, my opinion of your story is that that's probably the most valuable piece and byproduct of this journey that you've been on, is the ability to say, that you can disconnect your personal worth from your professional output, that those two things do not have to be directly correlated. Are you like, if you have a bad day at work, is it going to put you in maybe a shitty mood?
Yeah.
Of course. But the
Yeah.
fact that you've also created the intellectual dexterity to say, I know how to refill up my bucket, connect with people that make me happy, and get out and go have a good time, go see some music, fill myself up, right? So like,
Yeah.
this whole concept of like, I see human beings as a bucket, and it can either be filled, or it can be, or people can put holes in your bucket and dip from you. And
Yeah.
so you're gonna have bucket dipping experiences. If you're able to self-fill or identify ways to get out and fill your bucket back up, or go find those people, like Lee Outen, like, is the biggest bucket filler of any human being I've ever met in my life.
Good
Like, if I
personality.
if I want to go, like, just, it's like, have a phone call with Lee and just fill myself back up. Tim's the same way. I think Lee, because of his accent, it just is more fun to talk to. So but both of them are fantastic humans. And so, you find these people, and hopefully I'm that way for someone else. Kickshawn, I know you're that way for me. Like, there's people you talk to that you're just like, oh, that feels good, right? And
Yeah.
and there's other people you talk to where you're just like, that doesn't feel good, right? And so
Yeah.
the one thing that I think we can take away from this is that find the people that fill your bucket, and then fill other people's bucket intentionally. And then, like that, and again, in the, like, back to the kindness games, in an industry where we're focused on competition and a zero sum game, and like, and being just mean for no fucking reason,
Yeah.
we're on a mission to have positive impact. and whether, I think I got to like day 13. So kindness games, you took you 3 months. I'm like 3 years in and I still haven't finished it yet. So like now it's just like a running joke of like, yeah, I'll get to it. But
One per year.
yeah, exactly. Like, well, like 2039, I think is my target. So, you can just, and it's funny to see like the community that we've now connected with and become a part of, and it grows and grows. There's a WhatsApp chat right now prepping for ISC West, and
Yeah.
you already see it, people who are going to be there. We're connecting, and it's all us bringing each other together, specifically saying, hey, if you've never been to this event before and you don't have anybody to hang out with, this is where we're going to be. Here's my booth, come meet me,
Yes.
come talk to us. Let's make it a great experience, because it can be tough to go out in these environments if you're not used to it before or you haven't been a part of it. So anyway, now that was my turn to ramble a bit, but I just wanted to point out a few of these like great nuggets. I hope people go back and re-listen to that last 10 minutes of where you kind of unpack the intentionality of your approach, the focus, how you took that time to invest in yourself, to detach from the work value to the personal value, because that's life lesson stuff there. And for us to come across that at a younger part of our career is super important,
Yeah.
because if you're 50 and you're just figuring that out, it's going to be tough. If you're in your 20s or 30s, you're going to be set up for a lot longer, I think, healthier work life going
Yeah.
forward, which is going to make, I think, collectively your life a more happy and fulfilled place to be.
Yeah, I agree. And something that like I always keep in mind and I often tell my colleagues is I know some people come to work to wage war. Like they're like competing against others, or they're like if that person wins, I'm gonna lose. I'm like, I come to work to build bridges. Like that is what fuels my soul. Like I don't need anyone to lose. I want everyone to win. I know somebody will win less than others, but ultimately, like it is our jobs to make sure that when we come to work, we're living a fulfilling life. Like I'm excited about the work that I'm doing. I'm excited about the way that I engage with people. I don't want anyone to be like, man, that woman is just horrible to work with. Like even if the project is really hard, like it's just so easy to like just have a nice demeanor, have some empathy, like understand the other person's side, and then just be like, guys, we'll get through this together. So no, I completely agree with you. I think the adaptability and the dexterity that we have in like our 20s and 30s is probably so much different than you might have in like your 40s and 50s and your 60s, and by then hopefully you're like retired and now you're sitting on a beach drinking mojitos, but goals.
I mean, kindness is free. And so, it doesn't cost anything to treat somebody with respect and decency. And I think that's the when all was stripped away. And I think, again, these interesting lessons that we kind of connected and learned through the pandemic was, um, the only thing we could control was like how we treated people,
Yeah,
regardless of our beliefs and our differences and politics and what have you. You could choose how to treat somebody, and that's, I think, what we all learned together as we were sitting on those Zoom calls with each other. And by we, I mean, TKG and GSD folks, when we
yeah,
were, all different backgrounds, all different beliefs. We didn't know if what was happening was right, wrong, or indifferent, meaning the way different states and countries were handling things, but we knew that like we could treat each other with respect and kindness.
yeah,
And that was the one thing that we can control. And in the workplace, you can do the same thing. If you're a leader of people, you can treat people with empathy and kindness. Like you can treat customers kindly, you can treat
yeah,
competitors kindly, like anybody. There's no reason to not smile. And that can defuse a lot of bad situations by just leaning in with empathy, smiling, and looking for common ground. So, I really, that's the one thing that I think about when I talk to you, and like hear you speak, and and you've just emphasized it in bridge building, right? Like it's kind of like I'm reaching across, I want to hold your hand, like let's walk
this
this path
way.
together.
Yeah,
I love it. I feel like we could talk forever. And we may have to do this again. There's a ton of stuff we didn't even get to. I'd love to talk more. I mean, there's a whole subject of just like the practical application of product, program management into the security industry. I think it's a space we do very poorly. I'm talking about like the actual practical applications of like managing projects and programs and
Yeah.
applying, you know, you know, agile frameworks and other, that plus the communications and marketing piece. I think there's a masterclass that you could teach on that. So a whole nother topic for that. But I'm so appreciative, Kehkashan, that you took the time to hop on, to have this conversation with me and just drop a ton of knowledge to this audience. And thank you from the bottom of my heart for making time. And hopefully you enjoyed the discussion as much as I did.
Oh, this was a blast. Let me tell you how much I enjoyed these type of sessions. But seriously, John, thank you just for inviting me, giving me the space to tell my story. I used to get really nervous about this stuff, but I think having conversations like these so often, I feel like a pro now. So thanks for giving me a stage.
Well, you sound like a pro too. So thank you. Appreciate it. Have a wonderful rest of your day and let's go do great things.
Awesome.